thought I'd do a rundown on my RB28 engine, seeing as right now is probably a really good time because it's in pieces. So I am at Drift Direct and we're about to reassemble the engine. I've just been bolting everything onto the long block. And what I'll do in this video is I think I'll just start from the top down, just go over the bits and pieces we use in this engine, bit of history on it. It's a RB28 2.8 litre straight 6 turbo, makes around about 600 kilowatt on the wheels on 28 pound. We run an EFR 9180 Borg Warner turbo and we rev it to around about 9,500 revs. Seems to be pretty reliable. The biggest issue we've had was the block cracking. We run a 23U RB25 block, and we found the limit of that block recently. So this block right next to me, or this engine right next to me now, is actually sleeved. It should be good for a lot more power. So start with the top right here. Well, let me just walk around it at least and have a look at it. So what we run is from the very top of the engine. In fact, I can take these covers off because they're not bolted on. Studs, so we remove the factory bolts and replace them with studs for the, whatever you call those things, I don't even know what the name of them is, things that hold the camshaft down. The actual camshaft itself is a Calford cam, 290 degree, 11.3mm lift, which are pretty much drag cams, but because we run nitrous on this thing, we essentially eliminate the lag problem. Without the nitrous, this thing comes on at like between 4,500 and 5,000 revs. With the nitrous, it comes on at like 2.5. So we've basically got a power band from 2,500 to 9,500 in this car, and it makes it pretty fun to drive. Now underneath the valves, we run a Calford cam beehive spring. That spring has around about 103 pound of pressure on the seat, so it's quite a lot of pressure. Partly the reason why I have started to recently run quite a strong racing cam belt. Below the head, we've removed, in fact I haven't removed, this head is off a 7-second drag car. Glenn Suckling's old R32 used to run 7.5 I think down the quarter mile, with a manually shifted gearbox. So this head was on a RB26 with a GT47 Garrett turbo on it, making around about 1,400 horsepower at the wheels. So what has been done to this header, there's quite a bit of porting on the intake side, a bit of porting on the exhaust side, and the squish pads have been removed from the head, so the head has a bit more cc than what it normally would. About 66, 67 cc in the head, and it's still running factory valves. So it's been proven to do 1400 horsepower. For me, it's plenty. And yeah, if we move down a little bit more from the head studs. So this engine at the moment right in front of me is running 11mm head studs. Previously, before I cracked the block on the other engine, we ran 12mm head studs. We've replaced the block completely on this new engine. 12mm head studs, potentially unneeded, I don't know. People are saying that they don't require 12mm. Apparently you can get away with over 1000 horsepower, or even 1300, 1200 on 11mm head studs. The reason why we didn't put 12mm head studs back into this block, because by factory they don't have those head studs, is because we didn't have time to rebore the block, and also the fact that apparently, whether it's true or not, it cracks the block or the deck surface. So we're going to go with 11mm head studs on this. Hopefully that should do what we need. Going down a little bit more, run a Tomy head gasket, 1.2mm, 87mm outer ring. I've always run Tomy on my cars. I'm sure there's plenty of other good head gaskets out there, but they do the job for me. And if we move down into the block, this is a 23U block. You can see the casting here. It's a four-wheel drive block. It's got four-wheel drives actually have got additional bolt holes here, and they've got a stronger rib on the bottom of the block. So we've had good success with these 23U blocks on the last RB25, on the last RB28 we had, and we ran that for over a year. But it seems that anything over 500 kilowatt the wheels is probably the limit before you start sleeving them. So that takes us to the next point. This engine is sleeved, so it's running Darton sleeves. The sleeves protrude about 1 thou above deck height, and this is quite a known combination of parts, I guess, that seems to be reliable. There are other guys in the world doing exactly what I've done. Moving down from the sleeves, the pistons we use are CP pistons, custom spec by Spool with upgraded gudgeon pins. This engine, because the squish pads have been removed in the head, runs quite low compression. It's 8.9 to 1, or actually 8.86 to 1 compression, which is still fine for us because we've got plenty of NOS down low, so we don't really have an issue with lag. The con rods we run, I-beam Spool. They run a 7/16 ARP 2000 rod bolt, and we've been revving this thing up to 9,500 with no issues, which is good. Noting that every time I do pull the engine to pieces, I always put rod bolts in them. I never reuse them. Whether or not I need to or not, I'm not sure, but that's what I've been doing. Bearings, we use ACL race bearings on big ends and mains, and on the main studs we're running ARP main studs as well. So when we bolted up the girdle with the main studs, we did a line hone to ensure trueness on for the crankshaft in the block, and below that we're just running a dry sump pan, which is a custom pan, which is pretty agricultural really, but it's been like that since 2013. It's all it really needs to be. In fact, we've even got the drains on the wrong side of the engine, but it's fine with us. Okay, moving on to the bolt-ons. So starting on the intake side, we're still running a 6 throttle body RB26 intake manifold. It's good for throttle response. Running some Expert 1600cc injectors. We've just modified this for dash fittings, so we can run dash lines for the radiator up and down the car, and we've also rerouted the water cooling directly so it doesn't have to go back up the block, so we just divert that into here, which goes to the return line. Alternator is off the LS alternator, custom bracket. Harmonic balancer, we run ATI super damper. And we've got a PRP trigger kit for the Hall effect sensor. The front of the engine we run OS Geiken cam gears, running a high power performance trigger kit, Gates racing belt, and we run a dry sump system, Aviad 4-stage. Manifold is a 6 boost, 1.25 inch runners into a V band. Makes it really easy to get the turbo off when we need to. 60mm wastegate and into a V band 0.82 single scroll housing for the EFR 9180 turbo. So that housing is not a Borg-Warner factory option. That housing is bought from a company called AGP Turbo, and it's slightly restrictive for the power that we're trying to push. Well, sorry, I should say it's slightly restrictive for the power that this turbo could push. The limiting factor on this car is the exhaust housing. However, it's relatively good for spool. This car, even though it comes on at about 4,500, 5,000, is mainly because of these big fat cams, and we've got so much overlap, the car barely idles. We run a speed sensor in the front of the turbo. Let's see over here. And this obviously goes into the ECU, so we can see how fast the compressor is spinning. In terms of clutch, we run a single plate clutch with a steel flywheel, factory Nissan bolts, and we've got the adapter or the spigot bearing custom piece which has been built for the Jericho gearbox that we run, because it sits out and the snout doesn't quite get into the back of the crank. I also didn't mention that the crankshaft is a spool performance billet crank, which is a 77.7mm stroke. And finally, an assortment of screamer pipes that I've made, which are absolutely horrible, but I'm always trying to get good sound out of this thing, so I've got a few different screamer pipes here which I'll be trying. I had that one on the car the other day, it sounded a bit deep. I'm going to try that one, but I reckon that one's going to sound the best. So it looks absolutely horrible, but it doesn't really matter. It bolts up there like that. Oh my god, just double barrel screamer. So that's a rundown of the actual engine itself. Any questions, just ask.